Have you ever wondered if a handful of local elections could actually predict the political future of the entire country? Well, it turns out that might be exactly what just happened. A recent series of results is being read as a direct message to the White House.
All right, so let's get right into it. We're not just talking about your typical run-of-the-mill local races here. No, think of this more like a political earthquake, sending tremors all the way to Washington, D.C., and really shaking up the national conversation.
So, in this explainer, we're going to break down what everyone is calling a Democratic sweep. This was the first major election in President Trump's second term, and we're going to explore what it really means for the administration's game plan moving forward.
And a lot of people are looking at this and saying, this is no coincidence. The consensus is that these wins are being seen as a huge referendum, a clear sign that public frustration is growing, especially with that federal government shutdown just dragging on in the background. It's a real temperature check on the mood of the nation.
Okay, so let's get specific. Where did this political shift actually happen? Let's take a closer look at the key victories that are really telling this story. And what's so fascinating here is just how widespread this was. You've got New York City making a huge ideological shift. Then you have Virginia and New Jersey flipping governorships. That's massive. And that result in California? That's a whole different ballgame. A strategic, long-term move that's aimed right at the 2026 congressional map. And if you want a perfect example of this, just look at New York. 50.4%. That's a decisive victory. This wasn't just a win, it was a huge win for the progressive movement. Zoran Mamdani, a Democratic socialist, won with a clear majority by running on things like affordable housing and immigrant support, ideas that are pretty much the polar opposite of the national conversation.
But this story is about so much more than just which party won. We're talking about some serious history being made here. These victories absolutely shattered some long-standing barriers. You've got Abigail Spanberger, Virginia's first ever female governor, Mickey Sherrill, New Jersey's first Democratic female governor, and Ghazala Hashmi is on track to become Virginia's first Muslim woman in statewide office. These are genuinely historic moments that are literally changing the face of American politics.
So you have to ask, what was really driving all this? Was it just a few really charismatic candidates, or was something bigger going on? Well, the data is pretty clear. This looks like a direct pushback against national policies and how they're hitting people's bank accounts.
Okay, look at this. This comparison really tells the whole story, doesn't it? On one side, you have what voters on the ground were actually talking about: affordable housing, childcare, the basic cost of living, kitchen table stuff. And on the other side, Washington was wrapped up in the government shutdown and a global tariff war. It's like they were living in two different realities.
And really, if you had to take all those exit polls, all those voter interviews, and boil it all down to just one word, that word would be affordability. It's just a crystal clear signal that right now, economic anxiety is an incredibly powerful force at the ballot box.
Now, when voters send the message that's this loud and this clear, you better believe the White House is listening. So the big question is, how did the administration react to this political warning shot?
Well, let's just say the official response wasn't exactly one of, deep soul-searching. This quote from our source material really sums it up. The blame was pointed outward, at the president not being on the ballot and at the Democrats for the government shutdown. So a lot of finger-pointing, not a lot of looking inward.
And you really have to remember the backdrop for all of this because it's so important. This reaction is happening while the country is in the middle of the longest federal government shutdown in its entire history. That's a contrast that voters are definitely noticing, and it's almost certainly fueling that frustration we've been talking about. So, what you have now is a situation where these election results have basically put up a giant fork in the road sign right in front of the White House. With the 2026 midterms already kind of looming out there, the administration now has a huge choice to make about which way to go.
And that leads us to the biggest question hanging over Washington right now. It's pretty simple, really. Do you look at these results and say, okay, we need to adjust our strategy? Or do you just double down on the very agenda that voters just seem to push back against?
So, let's play out that double-down scenario for a second. What would that even look like? Well, it could mean cranking up the policies that really fire up the base. Things like accelerating immigration raids, even if states resist, or pressing forward with the tariff war, even if it means U.S. importers, and ultimately consumers, are the ones paying the price. Which, by the way, hits that exact same affordability nerve we saw in the exit polls.
So, with the 2026 midterms on the horizon, which path will the administration choose? Honestly, whatever they decide, one thing is absolutely for sure. These weren't just local elections, they were a national message. And they've put the White House on notice. The choice made at this fork in the road won't just define the next 2 years, it will set the entire stage for 2026 and beyond. The question now isn't just what the administration will do, but whether it can adapt to a political landscape that just sent a signal that was impossible to ignore.